In this video, I will show you 7 steps to build a perfect roofing system. So the first step of a perfect roofing job is to tear down to the plywood or the sub decking. The reason for that is because if you don't actually remove that first layer of shingles, you never see the plywood, you can't see the condition of it. In this case, a lot of this plywood was bad. It was warped, delaminating. It wasn't a good nailing surface for the new roof. And if you wouldn't tear that layer off, or if you would even just let the tar paper on, you would never see the actual condition of that plywood. So you'll see some guys that just tear off the shingles and not the tar paper, but that still doesn't let you inspect that decking. And you only know when it's really, really bad. Step number 2 is installing ice and water barrier and synthetic. So ice and water barrier and synthetic underlayments. And we always install 2 rows because code allows for, or they call for 2 foot inside the heat bearing wall. So this first foot is the overhang. You got the wall, it's about 6 inches. So 2 feet inside is about right up in here. 1 row would almost account for that code. However, it's not quite. So that's why we always put two rows of ice and water barrier. What ice and water is it's a peel and stick underlayment. And this here, the sticky side, actually adheres to the deck. So any nails coming through this will actually be sealed. And then in the winter, if there's ice dams and water runs under the shingles a little bit, it runs out under on top of the underlayment, won't actually get inside the house. And the eaves is where that most likely will happen. That's why code calls for it on the eaves. Quick note, on our drip edge, we always install the drip edge under the ice and water barrier. And the reason for that is, again, if there's some ice damming, a little bit of water ends up on top of the underlayment, that's gonna end up coming off, going straight into your gutter without ever coming in, touching contact with bare wood. Or as far as underlayment, we could use organic felt, which is what was on this roof, but we instead use the synthetic felt. It just, it's a lot tougher. It won't rip or tear like the organic felt does. And that will protect your roof in the case of a storm or wind blow off. Often what happens if there is organic felt on, the roof blows off and the underlayment blows off with it, and it effectively does nothing for your roof in the case of a storm. With synthetic, your roof blows off, the synthetic's probably going to stay, especially if it's cap stapled. Step number 3 is that all of the flashings are to the equivalent of so if you're installing a lifetime roof, your flashings need to last the same length as your roof. Often a roof ends up failing at one of the main leak points, and that's usually flashing, valleys, pipe boots, skylights, that sort of thing. So on a chimney, there's several things that we look at. We look at how wide the chimney is. If the chimney is wider than 24 inches, steep slope shingle specs specify that if it's wider than 24 inches, you need a cricket to divert the water around the chimney. In this case, this chimney is probably 16 or 18 inches. We'll install a metal pan that will go up the roof slope about 18 inches minimum. In this case, it'll probably go up about 20 inches. And so the first step is ice guard goes up the chimney about 4 inches. The second step is your flashing. So it gets step flashing on the sides. On the top, it'll get a metal pan that'll extend up the roof about 18 inches. And then last, it gets a counter flashing cut into the mortar joint. And that counter flashing covers the step flashing. Any water running down the chimney ends up on top of the counter flashing, and on top of the step flashing won't go in behind the step flashing. Something I see often is roofers will just either paint or somehow put lipstick on the flashing that's there instead of actually replacing it. If they're giving you a lifetime roof, the flashing needs to match the shingles. So another component of the flashing is the pipe flashings. We use the ultimate pipe flashing, and the reason for that again is that we want to install accessories of the roof that match the life of the roof. So these are guaranteed for the length of the roof. In this case, this is a copper pipe, so we install easy sleeve first, and then the pipe collar or pipe boot or pipe jack. But again, this is guaranteed to last the length of the roof. Number 4 is using the correct accessories with the shingles. Some people think a roof is just shingles. There's actually a lot more that goes into it. What you'll see is some people will save an old shingle and use that as your starter. So that's, just throw that on, nail it on, start with the first row of shingles. Others will take a regular shingle, just turn it around, use that for the starter. But what the manufacturers are actually requesting is an actual starter shingle. And this usually goes with the warranties. If your roofer is gonna register the warranties, this is a must. For those warranties to stand up in the fine print, this is a must. So it's an actual starter shingle. It's made for it. Its only purpose is to be a starter shingle. It comes with an extra line of sealant. And the purpose of that is just to make sure that that first edge, that any wind getting under it will not blow up that first edge. So it's that first line of defense on your roof, gets that extra layer of sealant, and that only comes when there's an actual starter strip used. All right, step number 5 is proper ventilation. So for adequate ventilation, you need intake and exhaust. And since hot air rises, intake is at the bottom, exhaust is at the top. For a roof, typically you get you have soffit vent at the bottom as your intake, and then ridge vent on the top. And it's just one of the last things that the roofers install. This allows the hot air to escape the attic. And what happens is if the hot air just stays trapped, there's no ventilation, the roof will overheat, and the lifespan of those shingles are going to be compromised. Often you see granules start falling off, the fiberglass matting is exposed to UV, and once that happens, the shingles deteriorate really quickly. Number 6 is hip and ridge capping. And this is your finishing shingle. It's the last shingle that goes on your roof. It's installed right over the ridge vent. And there's a couple ways that people have used shortcuts in the past. They'll use a 3-tab shingle, a full 3-tab shingle. They'll just cut that tab, use that as a hip and ridge. Or I've seen already where they cut an architectural shingle. And what happens over time, these delaminate and end up looking really bad. But instead, actually using a real hip and ridge shingle. And with Atlas and the non-staining warranty, this is especially important because water starts at the top, algae spreads in water. If you have a capping shingle that doesn't have the same 10% copper granules, you're going to have algae starting here that ends up spreading on the rest of the roof. So if you install, your shingles can be perfect, but your capping doesn't have the same protection against staining, that algae will end up spreading onto the rest of the shingles. Step number 7, the last step, is registering the warranty. This is stuff that happens in the background. Ask your contractor, is he certified and does he register the warranty? These are the steps that are important if there would be an issue down the road. You want to know that your contractor is going to provide you service even after you gave him the final check. This is what separates the real roofing companies from the chuck in the truck.